Hey guys, this is Maelstrom Spiral, and this is what if Naruto leaves Konoha instead of Sasuke. In this story, Sasuke is the one chasing Naruto to bring him back to the village. Now let's begin chapter 1. As I raced through the trees towards my best friend, I could not fathom how I had not seen the signs. I had seen them before, in Itachi. But I needed to know why. I had to understand, why would he leave after convincing me to stay? If I had to guess now, it all started 6 months ago, about a week after my first Chunin exam. 7 months ago. I had just begun my Genjutsu training with Kakashi. It was arduous and painful, but my Sharingan was progressing nicely, according to anybody who had known one before the massacre. It had been a long day and I was just starting to regain my chakra. I activated my Sharingan just to test it out. Came on without pain, so I assumed my chakra was getting back to normal levels. As I casually strolled through the village, I came upon the river that split the village into two distinctive pieces. It was a beautiful day and the water slowly bubbled by. I looked around me to check if anybody was near, and once I was satisfied, I leaned up against one of the rails on one of the many bridges and admired its peacefulness. The reason I had looked around was because I knew that if Naruto or Sakura saw me, I would never hear the end of it. I must have simply enjoyed the tranquility of the sight for 5 minutes, before I noted something unusual about it. It seemed that the water level was slightly rising, and as time went on, I noticed it begin to rapidly rise, and then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a surge rip down the length of the river and only barely evaded the splash that would have surely knocked me off my feet. I was alarmed to say the least, so I ran along the side of the river in the direction that the wave had come from, to see that a battle was going on between Kakashi, Guy, Kurenai, Asuma, and two people wearing large black robes with a red cloud print. Upon closer inspection, Kakashi looked like he was hurt and had his Sharingan out. I was silently alarmed, and then excited. One of the two men was exceptionally tall, and had what appeared to be some sort of unusual sword, and he had blue skin. The other seemed to be of average height, and had black hair that was tied up in a ponytail that was eerily familiar. The genjutsu that I had learned that day was one that required eye contact, so I thought that if I could get the drop on at least one of them, the others might be able to better handle tall, dark, and blue. I briefly recalled Rock Lee's speed and mimicked it. I appeared face to face with Ponytail and made eye contact. I remember identifying the Sharingan and then realizing who I was messing with. I put too much chakra into the genjutsu, and thus failed in the execution, and then I tried to punch him, but he quickly and efficiently broke my arm and sent me flying. I recall these events rather stoically, but don't think for a second that I was not consumed by rage. Then I did the stupidest move possible, and stood up and looked him defiantly in the eyes, which was all he needed to put me under his Tsukuyomi. For what I recall as the next 72 hours, I relived my parents' and clan's deaths in graphic detail. After all of that, there was only darkness. I don't really know how I can really relate time in what that abyss was to me, but it felt like both forever and only a few seconds. When I woke up, I opened my eyes and looked around to see that I was in the hospital, with Sakura by my side. She saw my eyes and immediately shouted at me, "OHMYWDSASUKREYOLRIGHT." I flinched and then glowered at her. She could be such a pain in the ass. Then all of what had happened recently flew into my mind, and I rapidly started to scan the room for my murderous brother. I shouted, "Where is Itachi? Why was he here? Where the hell is Kakashi?" As I shouted all of this, Sakura looked at me incredulously and then mumbled something about fetching the nurse. She quickly left the room and I moved to get up. "Granny Tsunade said that you shouldn't move until she sees you to do a final checkup," said Naruto. And as I looked around me, I noticed that he wasn't there. Thinking I was crazy, I just continued to move. But then he spoke again. "I told you Granny wouldn't want you to move, so just sit still." Again I scanned the room, then looked up, expecting another one of Naruto's monkey tricks. But he wasn't there. In fact, the only person who was there was some poor soul in a full body cast. I twitched my leg, and Naruto once again forewarned me, "Don't move, stupid." I checked under my bed and then under my covers, but no Blondie. So I sighed and said, "Where the hell are you hiding, Naruto?" "Over here, dummy," was all I got for a response, but then I noticed the body cast seemed to squirm. Oh yeah, that was most definitely Naruto. I shook myself and remembered about Itachi, so I swung my feet out of my bed and started for the door. As I was going out the door, Naruto stopped me with this comment. "So, you were going to go after Itachi?" I stopped in mid-step. Who had told him about Itachi? "What?" I asked. "What do you know about my brother?" "He is the one whom you have sworn to kill, right?" Naruto replied. He killed your entire clan, and then told you to grow strong and then take revenge, didn't he? He attacked the village recently. You saw him and went nuts. The entire village saw what he did to you. I was part of the team that went out to convince Granny Tsunade to come back to the village and fix you. That guy has some serious jutsu in his disposal. If I was you, I would just drop this whole thing. I turned to him and responded, You don't know what it is like to lose everything, Naruto. And that is what he did to me. He took away everything I held dear to my heart. What do you know about any of that? By the end of that, I was yelling at him. He calmly replied, I didn't have anybody here for the longest time. I was a nobody, but then I met Irika-sensei and then Kakashi and then you and Sakura, and I guess I started to think of Irika as my father, and of you like maybe a brother. Don't tell me that I don't know what it feels like to hate. While Itachi was here, he killed Irika. My eyes widened. Did he really feel that way? Then all of his words registered, and I snapped back at him. If he killed Irika, whom you say is like a father to you, then why the hell are you trying to turn me off of my path? Then Naruto said something incredibly wise, something I had never expected from him at the time. He said, because that is exactly what he wants. I am not going to give him that satisfaction. He is the type of guy who takes pleasure in causing pain, and I won't let him cause me or my other special people any more pain by my going AWOL and hunting him down, only to get killed by his hand in the end. Don't get me wrong, if he shows his face around here again, I will face him, but I can't do that to the people I love. I was deeply disturbed by Naruto's argument. He had a valid point, but I didn't have those special people. I had already lost all of them to Itachi. As if sensing my counter, Naruto said, and yeah, I don't know what it feels like to lose everybody, but I know that if you were to leave to go and take him out, then I would do everything in my power to take you back. Itachi is a crazy and evil man, don't get me wrong, but he is not worth your time. Here you could make the village a better place. Here you could affect the lives of all the people who live here, and here is where one day you may revive your clan. I sat stunned in the thoughts that were now racing through my head. I liked what Naruto was saying, but I could not accept the idea of Itachi getting away with all that he did, and I said so to Naruto, who nodded. He then said, Look, on the way back to the village, I made Granny Tsunade promise to send out some ANBU to kill Itachi, and she gave me her word. Itachi will be taken care of, but not by you or me. I think the ANBU left as soon as I was hospitalized. As to how I got hospitalized, well, that is a story for another time and place, because I feel the morphine kicking in again. Nighty. Night. With that, Naruto fell into a deep slumber, with much snoring. I stood up and crept out of my bed just in time to see Sakura and a largely endowed blonde woman walk in the room. I stared, not in an impolite way, but in a questioning way to the newcomer, and she introduced herself as Lady Tsunade. As I tried to make a polite as possible exit, she stopped me and said, Look, I get the idea of why you want to kill your brother. It is understandable, really, it is. But I don't think that you will ever get that strong unless you start to really train like a Jonin-level ninja, so today you will rest, and then tomorrow you will begin training to defeat your brother. I know that your training has been a bit slow, shall we say, to make sure that Naruto and Sakura could keep up, but as of today, Squad 7 is officially disbanded. I wondered at how quickly she had adjusted to her role of Hokage, and then demanded, What is it that you could offer me now that is so different from what has come before? I need power, not more teamwork lessons. Kakashi walked into the room in the middle of my little outburst and then said, Because Jonin training isn't entirely accurate, as of tomorrow you are going to be trained as an ANBU. I will see to it personally. You will be trained by me until the next Chunin exam, and then we shall see if you are ready for the true training to begin. After that, you will be trained by none other than the gallant Jiraiya. He changed directions of conversation to Sakura. And you shall be taken under the wing of Tsunade as you requested. Sakura nodded eagerly, and then asked, But wait, what about Naruto? Naruto was apparently awake again because he responded, Until the next Chunin exam I will be training with Pervy Sage, then I guess I will go to the Toad Mountain. I haven't thought about it too much since all this was decided, but I think that is how Pervy Sage said it would work. Back in the present. It was this very conversation with Naruto that made the current situation all the more difficult to accept. Why would he leave now, and with Itachi? Why? I have all of these questions and absolutely no answers. For example, another question is, why did Hinata leave the village too? Maybe something happened to the two of them on that night that drove them so far off the edge. It was about 5 months ago today. 5 months ago. Training had been going exceptionally well. I could feel myself getting drastically stronger by the day. Naruto and Jiraiya, it seemed, were meant to be student and teacher. They had caused all kinds of trouble throughout the village now, and were usually banished to the training grounds on site, simply to avoid property damage, and now they were running about the countryside, training. They also seemed to have saved quite a few lives in their random acts of ninjaosity. I had heard of all of this, but I wasn't really paying attention. I had other things on my mind. For example, in recent times, public opinion of the Hyuga curse seal had taken a turn for the worse. Since Naruto's little scene in the Chunin exam, people had stopped allowing Hyugas to eat at their restaurants or shopping in their stores in protest. That day, I had been in charge of guard duty around the Hyuga household. It was my job to catalog all the people who came and left the household. There were 22 people outside of the large estate. Hinata was with Shizen learning the fine art of healing salves and chakra control, Niji was out on a mission, and the other 20 were just out and about on private business. I had changed a lot from my training. I no longer wore the t-shirt and shorts that I had been so fond of recently, but I had switched to the traditional garb for Uchiha Ninja, which was white robe covering the upper body, and black, baggy shorts all being kept in place by traditional shinobi ropes. I had an ANBU issue sword stuck in my rope/belt and my headband hung around my neck. And, think a mini version of Shippuden Sasuke, but with a headband. I was meditating and trying to keep my chakra signature as small as possible when 20 of the Hyuga all walked back at the same time, 2 abreast and 10 deep. They walked in a perfect march towards their home, and I made note of each of them in the journal I was given by Hayashi. After they were gone, I have gathered what they did, but I do have many questions about how they did it, but I know who caused it. For after about 30 minutes, a Yamanaka clan member walked up to the house and asked to be let in. "I can't let you in without permission from the clan head," I replied. "If you would give me a moment of your time, I will take care of it." This man was not satisfied with that for whatever reason, and he barged past me and into the estates. The sight that awaited me gave me nightmares for weeks. The 20 who had walked in had silently killed women, children, and the other members in complete silence. Then they had attacked the clan head. Hayashi had killed them all with the curse seal as soon as he figured it all out. He had been too late to save Hanabi, however. He was holding his dead daughter in his arms amongst all the blood. The Yamanaka man then went forward and attempted to stab Hayashi, who promptly killed him. Then 20 more Yamanakas came out. I was in total stultification. What the hell had happened to cause this? I broke the disaster seal in the scroll that Tsunade had given me in case something not even half as bad as this had happened. Then Hayashi just went to town on them. He took down 10 before they finally overwhelmed him. As he lay dying, Hinata walked in from her daily training. She saw everything before her and dropped to her knees. Then something bloomed in her eyes that I had never seen before. Hate. She stood up and attacked her clan's murderers. She seriously wounded 3 before the rest reacted, but by that time my training had kicked in and I began to disable them one by one. The remaining 7 were soon tied up and ready for transport to the interrogation room. Tsunade arrived on the scene with Naruto and Jiraiya in tow. Tsunade ordered Naruto to take Hinata to the tower and to wait for further instructions there, and for Jiraiya to go and get Inoichi. The results of all the interrogations were that Inoichi was totally unaware of all this activity, and that this was the plan of a group of radicals. I don't think that Hinata ever believed it though, and after all of this stuff, Hinata seemed to have changed. She held herself differently, she no longer was shy, she was soft-spoken still, and she wasn't bitter, but she seemed anxious to get something over with. Maybe it was then that she started to talk to the Akatsuki, I don't think I will ever know. But I do know that this is when Hinata began to train with Naruto. After all of this, they were like peas in a pod, totally inseparable, and I don't think that Naruto even realized it at first. I guess that I still wonder whether or not that tragedy contributed to Hinata's defection, but it definitely hit Niji harder than anybody would have thought. He was devastated to the point where he stopped training for a long time. It was only when he was pressed by urges from his teammates to train for the Chunin exams that he really began to train again, and that was some 2 months later. Back in the present, I knew that Naruto had headed off in this direction, but I couldn't guess if he was still heading this direction. Truth be told, I was following my gut. Naruto was straightforward. The trick in stopping him was to overpower him, which I was no longer sure I could do. His growth as a ninja was incredible, and I think that it is because of the fact that, like Rock Lee, he is a genius of hard work. I first really realized that we were equals, I guess, in the second round of Chunin exams. A month ago, the first 2 exams had been nearly the same as they were the time before. They had even used the same questions. And because the exams were once again in Konoha, I found the Forest of Death much less foreboding the second time around. For the following month, Kakashi had handed my training over to the Seal Master ANBU, whose codename was Weasel. It wasn't a month of training per se, more like a month of experimentation. He toyed with the curse mark that Orochimaru had given me, and had quite accidentally activated it. Once we had done that, the rest of the work was simply learning to control that great and indisputably black chakra. I had begun to get the feel for it, and as the third exam was only a day away, I had begun to grasp the idea of only partially transforming my body so that I could gain greater control of my actions. Naruto had, according to rumor, begun elemental training while I was in the ANBU headquarters. He had made startling progress, according to Kakashi. I went into the exams, knowing I would be impressed by my friend, but I was completely blown away. The first match was himself against Temari. He started out by casually walking down the steps to the arena, which immediately caught my attention, and Temari walked right next to him. They took their places, and the proctor began the match. "Hey, aren't you the one who Shikamaru let win?" he taunted. "If this is who I have to fight, then it should be no problem at all. I am going to own you." Temari had tick marks all up and down her forehead while she said, "Well, I have got film on your attacks, and I have memorized your attack patterns. I am going to know what you are going to do before you do it." "But are you going to be able to stop it?" Naruto's chakra began to visibly glow around his feet, and then he did something that I had never seen before. He made the chakra contract and then explode, which propelled him forward at an astonishing rate. Once within a foot of Temari, he pulled back his fist and punched her right in the gut. I had activated my Sharingan as soon as the match had begun, so that I could refer to it later myself, and I could see that Temari had had the wind knocked out of her, quite easily. To her credit, she reacted well. She flipped back in midair and then swung her fan, doing her special wind scythe jutsu to fend off Naruto. With a poof of white smoke, one of Naruto's shadow clones appeared and threw Naruto out of the deadly tornado's way. Naruto spun as he landed and formed 3 more shadow clones. The 3 clones sped forward and engaged Temari in combat. One by one, Temari made them poof out of existence, and once they were all gone, Naruto was grinning from ear to ear, as if he had discovered some great secret in her attack patterns. Once more he created a shadow clone, but this time the 2 of them started to form something in the real Naruto's right hand. It was a ball of pure chakra rotating at high speeds in every direction imaginable. The chakra was rotating so fast that it was making a strange noise. Naruto locked onto Temari and roared, "Rasengan!" Using his earlier chakra dash trick, he threw himself forward and straight into Temari's fan. This attack that I would come to know as the Rasengan went straight to Temari and caused her to fly backwards while spinning in the air, and using my Sharingan, I saw that the attack actually disrupted Temari's chakra and thus probably her internal organs. She had lost consciousness before she even hit the wall behind her. The proctor called the match and then called some medics to take Temari away. Internally, I was debating whether or not Temari had just stopped training, or if Naruto was just that good. The idea of fighting Naruto now was more than exciting, it was mouth-watering, and it would be the perfect test to see if I was improving fast enough. Naruto celebrated briefly in the middle of the arena and then bounded up the stairs, seemingly back to his old self. He beamed out to the crowd. The proctor announced that the next match would be between Gaara and Sakura. That match wasn't exactly much of one. Sakura had made leaps and bounds under the tutelage of Lady Tsunade, but she was nowhere near Gaara's league. He made the match short and sweet. After Gaara was back up in the competitor's box, the proctor called Hinata and Rock Lee into the arena. I was quite sure that this too wouldn't be much of a match, but I paid attention to it anyway, and I am glad I did. Hinata had come out of nowhere apparently. Rock Lee spewed his usual bit about the flames of youth and then began to pump his fist into the air. He shouted out to everybody in the arena, "I am getting excited." Hinata began the match by chakra dashing. I guess that she and Naruto learned it from the same person, straight at Lee, and she began one of the infamous gentle fist combos. Lee blurred out from in front of Hinata and then blurred back into existence behind her, but she could see this coming with her Byakugan, so Hinata ducked under one of his punches and began her assault anew. Lee blocked most of the hits, but I noticed that the color of his chakra had become disrupted, which meant that Hinata had hit some of his chakra nodes. Lee looked at her as if she had slapped him instead of disabled him. He jumped backwards and waited for her to make her move. She dropped low into the primary gentle fist stance, but Lee became alarmed, and while Hinata was fine-tuning her chakra, he went in for the kill. He launched her into the air and began his primary lotus move. As he was about to slam Hinata into the dirt, she broke free of Lee's bandages, which slightly broke her fall. She rolled forward and turned around to face Lee. He was swerving around on his feet, apparently a little dizzy. She dashed at him again, but as she did it, the chakra in her hands seemed to change color. It was subtle, but I could discern it. She slammed both her palms onto Lee's torso and sent him literally flying. He flipped and landed awkwardly. The proctor was about to call the match when Hinata stopped him and pointed at Lee. He was getting up. He screamed, "I am going to use all of my power." His skin turned red, and his hair seemed to be waving up and down with the pulse of his own heartbeat. His chakra flowed visibly from his body. He had opened 5 of the 8 gates. He dashed forward and did what Guy called the mad dance of infinity, which meant that he went absolutely apeshit against Hinata. She took all the blows. Once they were done, she surely looked haggard, but there was an air of determination about her. She calmed down and activated her Byakugan. Then it hit me, she had down everything she had without the use of her blood limit. It was astounding. Dropped into a new stance and waited for Lee. He charged in at her again, but this time, she was ready, so she dropped under him and pushed him into the air. Then she formed long and very sharp needles out of chakra and jumped into the air. She began to spin in the air and slash at Lee, and as she went, she disrupted the color of his chakra at an alarming pace. She was moving so quick that I had trouble following her exact movements. Her needles actually closed Lee's chakra points again and then sealed the gates he had opened. Lee fell to the ground, totally unconscious. I could not help but stare. When the hell had all this happened to her? As I silently pondered at her growth, the proctor called my attention. Niji was already in the ring, waiting for me. I shook myself and jumped down into the ring. The crowd was pounding their feet and different people were screaming out, "Niji?" or "Sasuke?" Once again, it seemed that I was the match to watch. I pointed at Niji and said, "All right, I am going to take care of you." "It is interesting," Niji remarked, "that this match happens. I guess the greatest bloodline of Konoha will be decided here and now. I won't lose to you, Uchiha Sasuke." Right from the get-go, I mimicked Naruto's chakra dash trick, but Niji seemed to have been waiting for just that, because he started his chakra rotation just as I was going to hit him, which repelled me effortlessly. As I observed him continue to spin even after I had been repelled, I remembered what Kakashi had told me. This guy was a close combat fighter, which meant I had 2 options, ninjutsu or genjutsu. I silently formulated a plan of attack and then jumped backwards onto the wall and struck the same pose that I had first used for Chidori. Niji had apparently heard of this move because he had activated his Byakugan and was staring boldly up at me, as if daring to try it. Then I did something he obviously didn't expect. Fire style. Phoenix Flower Jutsu. 3 high-speed fireballs shot down at him and he just barely dodged out of the way, so kept up my assault. After about 3 more volleys on my end, he just started to do his rotation again, which caused my fireballs to bounce back and hit the dirt, doing nothing. When I stopped shooting, he stopped rotating, so I established eye contact, which was all I needed. I put him into a genjutsu that would keep him absolutely still, and thus made him a perfect target. I began to charge my Chidori. Once it was fully formed, I charged down at him, and as I was charging down at him, he began to slowly move out of position. But at the rate he was going, it wouldn't be enough. I got a solid hit with my jutsu, but then his body turned into a log, and my hand was secure inside of it. He smirked as he said, "But now, you are in range." My eyes widened as I knew what was coming next. He began his 64 trigrams combo, and as he did so, I could feel my chakra fade out of my control. 64 palms. I flew backwards and hit the wall. Smoke poured out in front of me. I knew there would only be one way for me to win this fight now. So I let the first level of my curse mark go. The black chakra flooded my system and reopened all of my chakra points. The black marks appeared all across my left side, and I knew that my left eye had turned black and a sickly yellow. Niji stared at me in confusion, but that was all the opening I needed. I charged another Chidori and dashed at him. As the cursed chakra mingled with my own, my Chidori turned a sickening purple. Niji began his rotation, but this time it wasn't enough. I broke through and hit him solidly with my jutsu. I felt his blood on my hand and removed it. He had a deep hole in the right side of his chest. He collapsed and the proctor called the match. My match concluded the first round of matches, and as such, the combatants were to receive a break in food. The proctor called an intermission for the audience, and he directed us to a door inside the waiting box. Once inside, Tsunade personally saw to our wounds, and then we were allowed to do as we liked for about an hour. Inside this room were soldier pills, chakra recovery drinks, and electrolyte water. Once I had had my fill, I went to go find Naruto, but he was already talking with Gaara, and Hinata was facing the other direction, as if standing guard. I tried to walk around her, but she intercepted me. As I began to protest, she said, "Naruto and Gaara have asked to not be disturbed by anyone. Please, sit down on one of the chairs behind you, and I will let them know about you once they are done talking." After all this she bowed to me, but the whole time, stared me defiantly in the eyes, as if daring me to try anything else. I put on my best stoicism face and sighed and sat down right there. I tried to read their lips, but they were facing the other direction. At one point Gaara was shocked by what Naruto said, and Naruto slumped. Gaara obviously said the right thing because Naruto nodded and stood back up. Gaara continued to talk for a long time, and Naruto kept nodding, and eventually Naruto stopped Gaara and said something to him. Gaara smiled at him and nodded, holding out his little finger, and Naruto put out his own, and they obviously made some sort of promise. I could read Gaara's lips this time. He said, "That is the promise of a lifetime, Uzumaki Naruto." They turned around and saw Hinata standing in between them and me, and I saw surprise flash across Naruto's face and then a deep anger. He stomped over to me and said, "Did you use your Sharingan to read our lips? Did you?" I shook my head. It was mostly the truth anyway. He looked like he was going to say something else, when Hinata said, "Naruto, I made sure he didn't use his Sharingan, so don't freak out." Naruto calmed down immediately, but I was still in awe of Hinata. She hadn't turned red from simply being in his presence, and now, she was actually talking over him? Something was up, but at the time I couldn't tell what. After our brief respite, we were called back to the combatants' box, so the matches could commence. The proctor called Naruto and Gaara down into the arena. Naruto and Gaara walked down to the arena nonchalantly, and then walked 5 paces apart. "I am gonna run wild," shouted Naruto. "Take your time," replied Gaara, "and enjoy the terror of the sand." The crowd roared as the battle began, and I turned on my Sharingan in case Naruto showed any more new tricks. Naruto dashed up to Gaara and was in the process of punching him when Gaara attacked. Sand flew up from all directions and encased Naruto. Chakra exploded out from the lump of sand, and Naruto fell to the ground, landed on his feet, and jumped backwards. He pulled 2 kunai out of his sleeves, 1 for each hand, and put some chakra into each as he threw them. Gaara put up his defense of sand, but the kunai went through the sand somehow. Kakashi would later explain that Naruto used his wind affinity to enhance the blades of the kunai, so that they would even penetrate Gaara's sand. Gaara's blood splashed onto the sand in front of him. After the kunai gashed his left leg and scalp, Naruto then grabbed at something in the air in front of him and began to retract his 2 kunai. They were apparently attached to strings, but Gaara's sand wrapped around the kunai, and Gaara used that to pull Naruto towards him. With an audible thud, Naruto landed on the ground in front of Gaara, who then used his special jutsu, the sand burial. Blood seeped out of the coffin, and I really thought Naruto was dead, until his severely broken body tumbled out of the sand. Gaara had used enough pressure to merely break bones, not implode him, thankfully. Gaara began to signal medics to come down and help his opponent out, but Naruto crawled onto his knees and said, "Don't underestimate me." The further he stood up, the more a strange chakra began to pour out of him. It was red in color, and it made my hairs stand up on end. The birthmarks on his face became more pronounced and as weird as this sounds. His eyes turned a deep red to match the chakra. It was obvious that whatever this chakra was, it was healing him quite rapidly. Gaara charged forward to stop this transformation before it was too late, but he was too late. Naruto appeared behind Gaara and punched through the sand that was his shield, and landed a solid punch. Gaara flew forward and Naruto appeared in front of him and kicked him back to his original spot. Now it was Gaara who was in bad shape. Naruto's powerful combo was making quick work out of the terror of the sand. Eventually, Naruto decided that Gaara was done fighting, because he stopped punching and called down the medics. It was all done in moments. Naruto and Gaara were both rushed to the hospital for their wounds, so I walked down to the arena, expecting my match with Hinata. I looked over to her and said, "I don't feel like I am gonna lose." "You are within range," was all she would say for the entire match. I tried to jump back, but it was in vain. She just rushed me and began the 64 palms combo. At the end of it all, I fell to the ground on my back. I brought out the first level of the curse mark again, but Hinata was ready for that. As I stood up, she spun and struck me on the center of my chest, and with her added wind chakra, I caught air. I smashed into a hard place for the second time that day. I looked around as the dust cleared to find myself embedded in a tree. In addition, I could feel that my heartbeat was irregular. Hinata had her Byakugan activated, and she simply stood there, watching me feel pain. I placed my hand over my heart and used a pulse of lightning chakra to fix my heart, and I coughed up blood. With nothing more than a slight whoosh, Hinata appeared next to me, with a kunai at my throat. I shouted, lightning style, Chidori current. Hinata staggered backwards in shock to my jutsu, and I used that opportunity to jump out of my wooden prison and shoot some heavy-duty fireballs. Hinata avoided the first two, but the third got her right arm, scorching it. We made eye contact and I launched one of Kurenai's favorite genjutsu. It ensnared the opponent and gave me the opportunity to stab them, but suddenly I felt myself wrapped up once again in a tree. Hinata's torso grew out of the wood, with a kunai in hand. She had reflected the genjutsu. She was full of surprises today. I stopped my chakra just in time to prevent my imminent death. She stabbed and missed. I charged a curse-powered Chidori and charged toward Hinata, but she performed a deft substitution jutsu. I turned in midair and met her kunai with one of my own. We glared at each other and then shoved each other away. Fire style, I shouted, Grand Fireball Jutsu. It was a direct hit, but when the smoke cleared, Hinata was standing up, her clothes on fire, but a look of iron determination in her eyes. So I mimicked Rock Lee's speed and ran behind her and chopped at the back of her neck, sending her into unconsciousness. I withdrew the black chakra back into its seal and walked up to the combatant's box, and then into the back room for medical attention. Naruto was lying on a nearby table, completely out of it by the look of it, and Tsunade pointed to a nearby table. I sat down and she went to work on me right away. In about 10 minutes, I was beginning to feel human again. I walked outside of the room for a bit of fresh air, and once I really felt back to normal, I walked back inside. Naruto was sitting up, and Tsunade was carefully studying him. He saw me and his eyes narrowed. What crawled up your ass? I asked him. Let's go outside, said Naruto. Fight me now. You're still recovering. Just relax for a bit. The fight can wait. Shut the hell up and fight me. It was then that I noticed his eyes. The normal, stupidly cheerful blue had become ice cold. He was dead serious. He continued, You always think that you're better than me. I won't stand for it. You think that you are better than me because of those damn eyes. I don't care what clan you're from. I found myself smiling as I said, Then the timing couldn't be better because I want to fight you too. Let's go. He walked out of the room and jumped down into the arena. I followed suit. The crowd roared in excitement. They hadn't been expecting us for some time. You are such a loser, he said. Who do you think you are fooling? You're talking a lot of trash. Naruto, are you regretting calling me out? Shut up and bring it. I looked him up and down. There was something wrong about him. Then it hit me. He didn't have his headband on. Put on your headband, I said. I'll wait. I don't need it. Just put it on. You couldn't put a single scratch on my forehead. That isn't it. I cried. It is a symbol of Konoha ninja. Fighting is equals. I already asked you, he shouted. Who do you think you're fooling? You think that we're equals. Yeah, I do. I have always been better than you, Naruto. You're making me angry, Sasuke. That is because you're still weak, isn't it, Naruto? We both charged at each other and punched with our right hand, then blocked the other's punch with the left, resulting in a stalemate. I disengaged and jumped into the air. I shouted, Fire style, Grand Fireball Jutsu. I hit Naruto's general area, but I wasn't ready for what came next. The smoke cleared, and Naruto and two shadow clones were all charging something up. When it was done, it looked like a Rasengan stuck in the middle of a gigantic shuriken. Naruto cried out, Wind style, Rasen Shuriken. I focused all of my power into one Chidori and shouted, Chidori, the 1,000 birds. I started towards Naruto in midair, and he jumped up towards me with his new creation. Right as we were about to meet, Jiraiya appeared between us and sent us different directions. I flew into a wall which shattered upon contact with my jutsu. Naruto, it seemed, was able to retract his new jutsu before he collided with the wall, so he merely bounced off. I rolled over onto my butt. Why the hell would you throw that jutsu at a friend? Naruto, you know how powerful it is. Naruto ignored him and walked straight up to me, spat at my feet and said, I am done with you, Sasuke. He turned around on his heel and hopped out of the stadium. That was the last I saw of him. Back in the present. About an hour ago, I had received word that Naruto and Hinata had run away. I was selected to be on the team of 5 to take them back. It was me, Shikamaru, Niji, Kiba, and Chuji. I want to know why they left. I thought it had been Naruto's dream to become Hokage, but that is never going to happen now. He will be lucky if he isn't put in jail for life, but I have to bring him back, because deep down, I know he would do the same for me. Hinata's perspective. I activated my Byakugan and focused backwards. Sasuke was in pursuit, as according to plan. Sasuke and the others are now following us, Naruto, just like Tsunade said they would. What does Itachi want us to do next? I think, he replied, the closest hideout is in the final valley. We will have to beat them there at least. How fast are they going? Quite fast. They will catch up to us before then. Then the only option is to use those drones that Sasori planted for us. I will activate the seal. Right? After that, we just have to hope that they will win. Remind me why we are doing this again. We have to make sure that the Akatsuki will not move against our village. We need to secure seats. You know all that, why do you ask? I shook myself. I asked him that because I still didn't believe that this was happening. It all started about 5 months ago. 5 months ago. It was my birthday and my day off. My father had, however, called me into the family rooms. It was the center of the complex, and was mainly used for the sake of showing off the strength of the clan to village officials. Namely, the Hokage, Tsunade. Once I had received the summons, I quickly changed into formal clothes and hurried over. I entered the room to find my father, the clan elders, the village elders, and the Hokage herself. I immediately began to prepare the tea for such a meeting, as that was what I usually did, but my father stopped me with a hand motion. I subsided into the proper sitting position and waited for further instructions. My father began, Hinata, I have called you here today to give you some information about some of the goings-on of the clan government, because you are the heir to the head spot. So listen carefully and do exactly as I say. I nodded in bewilderment. He had never shown such interest in me, so I sat there quietly as the conversation began anew. Look, back to what we were saying, Tsunade said. We have reason to believe that several clans and groups in the village are greatly upset by the curse seal tradition of your clan. We have stopped every step in the government to outlaw anti-curse mark legislation, but with that out of the way, many will resort to violence. I know that you can take care of yourselves better than we can, but if we appear to be protecting you, many will think twice about trying to openly draw you into combat. For once your elders, my elders, and myself all agree about this, so why don't we give it a shot? My father sighed and then nodded his head in assent. I guess I won't mind the Uchiha boy to stand guard, but he will not have direct access to the clan grounds. Understood? Tsunade nodded and then said, That only leaves that one other matter I had to speak with you about. I am going to have to ask all the elders and the girl to leave for this, as you know. The room exploded with mutterings. After all, what could be so important that the elders were not on the list of people who were allowed to know? I myself was partly curious and partly anxious to get the heck out of that room. My daughter can stay, my father said as I got to get up. I have already talked to you-know-who about her. He finally figured out how we could solve her problem. I started to shiver in fear, for when it came to trying to get my skill level up, my father would try anything to get results. He had tried good cop, bad cop, he had tried different teachers, detention, start over with the slightest mistake training, and even hypnotism. Whatever this new scheme was, it was sure to be painful and most likely a waste of time. Tsunade seemed to see all of this from my simple reaction. So she waited for the elders to leave, and then she looked at my father and said, What could he possibly do to correct the seal? Seal? After I had said it, it didn't register that I had said it for about 5 seconds. I blushed furiously at my father's reaction, the standard angry Hayashi eyebrow twitching, and began to apologize when Tsunade reached into her robe and pulled out 2 scrolls, one with a black background and red cloud print. The other was lavender in color, and tossed it to me. I caught them both and looked down at them. I opened the lavender scroll first. It was addressed to me. Dearest daughter. My dearest daughter, if you are reading this, then it means that I have failed. I have failed in removing your curse. An evil man by the name of Madara Uchiha has altered your personality. You are a kind-hearted individual, I hope you know that isn't wrong, but your lack of confidence is something that shouldn't ail you. In this rapid loss of character, your ability to be a ninja has been deeply affected. For he also sealed more than half of your chakra in this process. I want you to stay compassionate, but you must have some steel deep in you, and I know that you shall desire that too. I hope that you will meet the man who can help you, for we know of only one other man who could possibly undo this, but he has not matured to that stage of growth yet, so we have had to wait. I know this is hard to hear, but you shall be very powerful once the seal is removed. Another matter that I want you to understand is, you have a greater destiny than being clan head. You must be a protector of this noble village. I entrust you this sacred duty. I want you to understand, talent is great, but one may only become legendary through hard work. I hope that you have worked hard to get where you are now, but you must keep working even after this. This journey that lays ahead of you will be lonely and dangerous, for you must never be defeated, but don't worry too much. It has been arranged that the son of the fourth Hokage shall also make this journey along with you. I know that you will get along just fine. Have confidence, my child. Your mother, Arya Hyuga. I was shocked to say the least. I didn't think that I was good enough to do this. In truth, I was close to tears in pure fear. It was then that my father placed his hand on my shoulder and held me closely to his chest to comfort me. He had never done anything of that kind to me before. As I calmed down from just listening to his heartbeat, I opened the second scroll. It was the mission statement of the Akatsuki. It turned out that this organization was founded by the first Kages, and it had been working in the shadows ever since, keeping the peace. Now, it was determined that I was to study under one of its members to one day replace him. His name was Itachi Uchiha, the man who had killed his entire clan. This scroll also contained a detailed description of why the massacre was necessary and how I would be turned into a member. As I read in awe of this man who had given up everything to protect the village, I realized that that was what my mother and father were asking me to do. I was to give up everything and go along with this boy to do God knew what. As I read the scroll more, a seal came up on the paper. It released a crow with a Sharingan eye. It looked at me and I fell under its jinjutsu. I found myself in a rather large and empty cave, with the only decoration being a throne carved into the cave wall. As I scanned the room, crows flew out of the shadows and formed into man sitting on the throne. He had black hair tied up in a ponytail and the Sharingan. This was Itachi. "It is an honor," he said, "to finally meet you, Hinata. I have been waiting for a long time." I took a step backwards in fear from him, but he stopped me with, "Calm down. I am not going to hurt you, Hinata. I am here to help you achieve your true potential. Just take my hand, and your growth will begin." To say that I was scared would be a severe understatement. I was downright paralyzed with fear. Itachi seemed to see this, and then he added, "I can show you all the proof you need to see that you will become great, Hinata. I know that you must be frustrated at yourself now. I can feel it emanating from you. Just wait there." A poof of smoke appeared next to me, and I gasped. The thing next to me looked like a being caught between being a crow and a woman. She turned her head and looked me right in the eyes and said in a raspy, unnatural voice, "I am the Morrigan. I live in the past, the present, and the future. You shall see things that will amaze you. And, because I like the look of you, I am going to leave a bit of me with you. You will be my priestess on this earth, and if you do as I ask, I shall upgrade your eyes. You must release the nine tails from Uchiha Madara's jutsu. It is time for you, whose name means sunshine to shine. Here is what you shall become if you accept Itachi's offer." Blackness took my vision. Then I saw two figures standing on a high wall. They were wearing matching clothes, black robes with red cloud prints, and wicker hats to conceal their faces. One took of their hat. She had long black hair and light, lavender eyes with no pupils. I realized that it was me. She jumped down from the wall and landed in the midst of at least 50 ninja. I let out a burst of chakra, and they all fell to the ground, and I somehow knew that they were dead. The second figure jumped down to join me, and he took off his hat. He had blonde, spiky hair, and ice blue eyes. It was Naruto, the son of the fourth Hokage. It was too much for me to process, and I started to get faint at the thought. But as soon as the vision had started, it ended, and I was left severely lacking. Itachi was standing in front of me once again, and he said, "I will train you to be that. I will take you to places beyond your imagination, and you will become powerful. I can make you into all the things that you want to be. But there is the price of leaving everything behind. Can you do it? This will take more courage than you think, and if you mess up at all, you will die. Are you ready for that?" I began to shyly nod my head, but Itachi's eyes narrowed. "But first thing is first," he said. "If you want to win over that knucklehead, you will need to be more courageous. So from this moment on, when I take off this curse from you, promise yourself to never stutter again, to never quietly do things when you should be protesting, and to always think of what is best for you and your special people. Do you promise me?" I thought about it for a second. This was exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be as strong as Naruto, I wanted to be as confident as Naruto, and I wanted to keep Naruto for myself. I looked deeply into Itachi's eyes and I nodded. I would no longer be the old Hinata. I would be reborn through this training, into what I wanted to be, because like Naruto always said, you never get anything from sitting there and hoping. Itachi undid the curse, and I felt power rip through my body, and I knew that it was now Hinata's time to shine. I took a knee before my new master and asked, "What do you need me to do now, Master Itachi?" He reached down and handed me a scroll and said, "You and Naruto must learn to do all the techniques on this scroll. It is a scroll that I received from my master, your mother, so I think you should do fine." I nodded and accepted the scroll, and the genjutsu ended. When I opened my eyes, Tsunade and my father were staring at me, questioning what had just happened. So I said, "I have accepted my life's calling. What Itachi didn't explain is bugging me. Why did Madara do what he did?" "He hates this village," my father replied. "And he hates everybody in it. He ran amok while the fourth dealt with the nine tails. Yours was one of the more permanent curses he left. Another example would be the drastic need of the Akamichi to consume food to generate chakra." As I thought briefly about what I had ahead of me, a voice seemed to rip through my head. It was the Morgans. "Remember our deal, you free my friend, and I shall give you what you need to survive, and I shall give you what you need to get what you want. Free the nine tails. When you are able." I stood up and bowed deeply to both my father and the Hokage, and ran out of the room. I had to speak to Naruto. I ran around the village, scanning for him. I checked Ichiraku's, I checked the training grounds and even his apartment, but to my great surprise, it was he who would find me. I had been looking for him for about an hour at that point, and the sun was beginning to set. He was talking with Sakura while walking through the park. They stopped at a nearby bench, and once Sakura's back was to me, I stood up and made eye contact with Naruto and showed him the scroll with the red cloud print on it. To his credit, he didn't respond as he usually would, but he instead ended his conversation with Sakura quickly and rather rudely and then ran off in the other direction. But as I watched him, he turned around and came to meet me. He looked at me incredulously and asked what I knew. "I was just taken in as you know whose apprentice. We are to train under him at the same time," I said. "You seem," Naruto pointed out, "different. But I want to know something even more than that. Why would you want to come along with us? Don't you want to stay here?" "I want to be with the person who I value most in this village, Naruto." "Well, who is that?" I am still astounded occasionally by some of his responses to stuff like this. So I expanded on my comment. "I want to be with you, Naruto. You are the person who I have been following so closely, and I do that because you inspire me." Naruto blushed as I went on, and then sputtered something involving the words, "too and kind and flattering." But I didn't wait for him to make up something that would make the situation more awkward, so I did something impulsive, something that I wouldn't normally do. I leaned in towards him and kissed him. At first it was merely a peck on the lips, but I moved it forward quite quickly. However, once it was really getting good, somebody interrupted us. It was none other than Sakura Haruno. She was, in a word, mollified. She sputtered and shook and then turned around and walked away. I looked over to Naruto, but he had fallen onto the ground and was bleeding profusely from his nose. I had done that to him? Damn, maybe I was better than I thought. Once I was sure he was okay, I told him to meet me at the Forest of Death for our training tomorrow, and so I decided to head home. Once I came upon my mansion, I was surprised to see Sasuke wasn't standing guard, and that most of the complex appeared to be on fire. I ran inside, desperate to see what had happened. 10 enemy ninjas stood around in the complex, setting fire to everything. Hatred blossomed in my gut, and I struck out. I still cannot remember the entire story, but I do remember that everything was red. I have been told that Sasuke took care of most of the killers, and Naruto took me away from the scene. After all of it, Naruto held me and let me cry out my anguish. Eventually, I passed out, because I remember waking up in Naruto's bed, and the smell of cheap cup ramen floating through the house. I got up and thankfully found myself fully clothed, so I walked into the kitchen and sat down on a chair by the solitary table. Naruto placed a cup of beef ramen in front of me, and I ate it slowly, and once I was done, all of the previous day hit me at once, and I broke down in tears once again. "I talked to Itachi last night," Naruto said, "and he said that we need to focus on training. I know that this is hard, but at least this way, they won't think less of you for leaving." It struck me that Itachi had told him to say those exact words, and as I read his face, that idea solidified. What a dork. I told him I thought he was a dork. He laughed awkwardly and then agreed, so I sighed and said, "The The scroll says that I have to have some reason to go AWOL. I guess this will be it then, won't it? I would be fool to not at least use this to some advantage. Besides, I already decided I would be dead to them. They just beat me to it, I guess. That is pretty fucked up, Naruto responded. I am serious. That is totally messed up. Oh, and what are you going to use as your excuse? Sasuke. How are we going to pull this off? Hinata, you should know the answer to that by now. We are going to keep moving forward. No matter what happens, we just keep our eyes forward. The die is already cast. We must deal with the effects of our cast. There is no going back. I am not scared of this future. I am doing what I think is the right thing, and I will follow through because that is what Iruka would do. I thought about it for a second, and what I came up with was that Naruto always did stuff like this, and he is going to be my man, so maybe that is the way that I should look at it. Yeah, that sounded right. Back in the present. It sounded easy then. Now as I was running for my very life from people who were essentially my comrades, I fully grasped my full situation. The worst part of it all was that I still hadn't really received any training yet, so if they caught me, I would not exactly be fighting on equal terms. That simple thought alone caused me to speed up. For blurs formed around us and then solidified. They were the Sasori's sleeper agents, Jirobo, Sakan, Tayuya, and Kidamaru. They were carrying 2 large wooden tubes with them. Naruto nodded to me, and so I jumped into the nearest one. They stopped and formed a sealing jutsu, and I was thrust into darkness. In Hinata's mindscape, I opened my eyes and I was once again in a familiar place. My mindscape. Stone and mosaic-covered floors were suspended by clouds. Stairs ran up and down connecting different clouds, but I was standing on the main floor. Black smoke whooshed out from the tiles, and once it faded, the Morrigan once again stood in front of me. I kneeled in her presence. She began to walk around me and watch me, as if looking for something. Once she had gone full circle, she stopped again. She said, "It has been a while, hasn't it? You have grown, I can tell. By jumping into those coffins, you jumped into my realm where I hold absolute power. You have fulfilled your part of the deal, so I shall keep my end." I was shaking in fear of her, for she was still intimidating beyond reason the second time around. I guess if I had jumped in, Naruto had too, which gave her all she needed to fix the Ninetales. She put her hand under my chin and made eye contact, and I felt something bloom that wasn't there before. "I have given you a great gift this day, child. Now you cannot merely see chakra systems, now you can also force people to obey your commands," she said. "And as you learn to use this ability, you might even attain a level of dominance so that you could force tailed beasts to obey. I haven't given this kind of blessing since I met that man from the Senju clan. Use it with care." With not another word, I awoke and was ejected from the casket. I landed on my feet, as always, but I was greeted with the sight of Tayuya carrying Naruto's wooden tube. The others were all gone. "What happened?" I demanded. As I did this, Tayuya picked up her burden and jumped off saying, "They got caught up in killing those kids following us. They should be back shortly. Until then, we keep on heading to the rendezvous." Soon we reached a grassy clearing and we stopped. Naruto jumped out of the tube and was slightly leaking out his red chakra. His eyes and whiskers had become pronounced. As this happened, Sasuke, Neji, and Shikamaru jumped out into the clearing after us. Sasuke looked to be oozing cold anger, as usual. Neji looked panicked, and Shikamaru looked bored, also as usual. Naruto let forth another burst of red power and started to laugh maniacally at the sky. He looked at me without turning to look at Sasuke and the others and smiled and ran towards the final valley, claiming his final battle spot. Sasuke ran after him, without looking at me. I locked eyes with Neji and ran out towards the forest. He followed me. Once we had reached a point where I could watch Naruto's fight, but not get caught up in it, I stopped and faced my cousin. He stopped in front of me and said, "It is my given duty by the Hokage to take you back to the village. I can't believe that you let Naruto corrupt you the way he did. I mean, I always knew that you liked him, but really, this? Become a nuke nin for a schoolgirl crush." "I did this for me," I replied. "Naruto is just a bonus. We are no longer cousins. Now we are the most deadly of rivals and enemies." There were no more words from me, for what words could have been? Would Neji or the village have forgiven me? No, that was not Neji's style, and it certainly wasn't the village's style. A change of heart on my part? No, never again. I would choose my own path from there on. Maybe I already had. Anyway, it was go time. I dashed forward, looking like I would begin a gentle fist combo, and then switched rapidly to ninjutsu. I blew small, compacted blasts of air at Neji, sending him flying backwards. He crashed backwards into the dirt, with a couple new bruises and a baseball-sized lump that was already forming on his left arm. "What about Shino?" he shouted at me. "What about what you did to him, huh?" I thought about what I had done to Shino. It wasn't so bad. Not nearly as bad as what Naruto had done to Sakura. In the early hours of that same day, I had promised to meet Naruto out at the main gate in 15 minutes, so I was hurrying. As I turned a corner, I found that Shino stood in my path. "What are you doing here in the middle of the night?" I demanded. "This road is the only way out of the village," he responded. "So I have been keeping watch." "I see, so." I walked up to him and looked him at his eyes. "Are you going to keep me from leaving?" He looked straight ahead, to his credit, but I grabbed his sunglasses and looked him in the eye, which is all I needed. I enacted one of Itachi's bread and butter genjutsu and sent him into a deep sleep. I then sent out a pulse of chakra which killed all of his bugs and their eggs, which put him out of commission for at least a month. Back in the present, I threw 13 kunai out into the air and they all missed as planned, then pulled one into the perfect position to attack Niji's blind spot, and by the time that Niji realized it, it was too late to dodge well enough and my knife slid into his back. Niji then tried to rotate, but I stopped it, and then he tried another jutsu, but I stopped it. He went through his entire arsenal and nothing worked against me. So I made the tiger sign with my hands and activated his curse seal. He fell to the ground, screaming and writhing in pain. I stopped it long enough for him to gain his composure, and I leaned down and whispered to his ear, "Remember our first Chunin exam? That is when I decided to do this, cousin. I have hated you, and I have grown strong. Now it is time for you to suffer as I have, for only then will you understand me. Revenge is best served cold, and payback is a bitch. Now suffer." I activated the curse seal again, until he lost consciousness, and then walked off to observe Naruto's fight. They were fighting on the bottom of the valley. It was getting good, and I knew that it was about to come to a close. So I sat down and watched Naruto and I waited for him to finish up. It was finally the big night, the night I would leave for the Akatsuki. I had packed all of my valuables, set the traps for the ANBU, and was making my final checks off my to-do list, when something caught my eye. It was the picture of Team 7. I picked it up and looked at each of us in turn, and then set it face down on my desk. I exited my shitty apartment and started towards the main gate. It was quiet, too quiet, but that was the way that Tsunade had wanted it. Nobody was to interfere with my defection. I made the final turn and the front gate was within sight. Sakura was standing there, and as she identified me, I stopped. I could feel Hinata watching, but I didn't say anything. Instead I said, "What are you doing here?" "It is the middle of the night. This is the only road out of the village," she said. "So I have been keeping watch. Just go to bed." I kept walking past her, and once I was past her she said, "What has been up with you lately? Why don't you tell us anything anymore? Why do you have to be so silent? Why can't you just let us in?" I realized that she was crying, but I had expected that since the moment I had seen her. "Like I said," I responded, "my business is none of yours, just leave me alone. You act like I am bugging you, but remember? That day when we first became genin? The day when they announced our team? You were so excited to be with me and maybe not with Sasuke, but—" "No," I snapped. "I don't remember being excited for much back then." "Well, that was a long time ago, and people and memories are always changing. But that was when it started, Sasuke and you, myself and Master Kakashi. The four of us on so many missions. It was rough sometimes, and there is no way you could call it easy, but when you get down to it, it was fun." "Naruto," she exclaimed, "I know the deal with the Nine Tails, and I have always known about how the villagers have treated you, but this, leaving like this, it won't make anybody happy, Naruto. They value you now. This won't make you happy or me happy. That just proves it, doesn't it? I am not like you people. I am on a different path than the rest of you. Yeah, we all worked together for a while. Sometimes I told myself that our paths went to the same place. Maybe we were a team once. But I have forgotten my dream of Hokage. I don't need the recognition of the people who made my life a living hell. Maybe we were a team once, but now I have decided to take the path that my father laid out for me. That is what I live for now. I can never be like you or Sasuke." Those words stung all the way out of my throat, because they were for the most part a lie. I still loved this village. I loved it so much that I had decided to give my dream of Hokage up for it. "BB, but if you leave, I will be very lonely, Naruto. You have become a big part of my life, Naruto. I can't imagine life here without you." "You," I shouted. Make me so mad. I dashed up to her and blurred behind her, brought out a kunai and slashed down her back, seriously marring her ribs and back, and then I knocked on her head with the flat of the knife, sending her to the ground. Hinata looked at me and said, "And you said that I was messed up, Naruto? She isn't going to be doing much with that injury for at least a year, and that is going to scar quite badly. Naruto, we weren't supposed to hurt anybody." I motioned for us to just leave, and Hinata dropped into step with me, and we left to begin the training that Itachi had promised us. 5.5 months earlier, I was in the middle of the forest training with my wind chakra. I formed a sword of pure air into my hands and began to go through the forms Itachi had given me. When I finished 6 levels, I stopped and brought out my training scroll. I laid it on the ground and activated the seal. The resulting poof revealed a 6-inch tall, transparent version of Itachi. He looked around at my training area and said, "I can see that you have mastered all that I instructed, so now begins the real purpose of this exercise. You are going to meet with Jiraiya and combine your wind chakra and your Rasengan to make your own signature jutsu." "Yes, master," I replied, "but I don't understand something. Why am I still hanging out in the village when I could be training with you in person?" "Because there is going to be someone else with you when you leave." "Right, I know, Hinata, you already told me that. But why can't you just fix her up and then we could leave tomorrow? It seems to make more sense to me that way." "Calm yourself, Naruto. This is a big part of what we are working on. Be calm and collected." It took quite the effort to calm myself, but I was getting better. Every moment here is getting more painful than the last, master. I don't know how much longer I can last before I go crazy. I of all people know what you are going through is tough, but I have to take care of certain things over here before I will be ready to train you. So just do your best, it will make you stronger. And when you do leave, you will be made into the ninja that your father and yourself want you to be. So keep your cool and work on this jutsu." With that, he poofed away, leaving me to my struggle. Back in the present, that jackass Sasuke had caught up with me faster than I had thought. Itachi had told me that our bodyguards would have the devices needed release the Nine Tails from Madara's curse. As I finished that thought, 4 people jumped out in front of us, 2 of them that the wooden tubes Itachi had described, so I nodded to Hinata and jumped in. My mindscape was as wet and dark as ever. I walked into the room with the Nine Tails and was unsurprised to see that he was the same as ever, large, scary as hell, and roaring. As I sighed in exasperation, a black feather drifted into my vision. I snatched it from the air and tilted my head as I studied it. I felt myself fall backwards, and then there was only black. When I awoke, I sat up too quickly and was rewarded with a pounding headache. I was still in my mindscape, but the cage for the Nine Tails was open, so I began to look around the room, rapidly searching for the massive beast. But the only other being in the room was a gorgeous red-haired woman with 9 tails. I won't lie, I nearly shit my pants. She walked up to me and said, "So this is the brat that guy saddled me with?" I crab-walked backwards and bumped into a wall. She walked up to me and bent over to look at me in the eyes. "You have nothing to fear from me anymore, Kit," she said. "My dear friend the Morrigan woke me up real good, and I have decided I like you. I don't know why, but I do, so I didn't leave." I sat open-mouthed, totally stupefied. She smiled and then said, "So, you are the silent type? Or are you just staring at my boobs?" I turned cherry red, and she laughed, a light, tingling thing. She continued, "Much as your little girlfriend is the Morrigan's priestess in this world, you shall be my priest. So I give you my blessing, and coincidentally, access to my great power. I am she who is known as the goddess of mischief, but I hate war. You shall keep this world at peace for me. For that is my will and my price for this bargain. Do you agree?" Peace was the entire point of my newest mission, so I nodded. She smiled, and with that smile I felt something tug from deep within me. It was not lust, it was not anything of that sort, but it was a kind of love, like, from what I understand, the love one has for one's mother, but far greater. I, in other words, knew that she owned me. She kissed my forehead, and I felt power flow through me like never before. I looked up at her after, and she closed my eyes with her fingers, and was thrust out of my mindscape. I was launched out of my wooden tube. I landed, and felt red chakra flowing through me freely, but it didn't burn, it felt good. I felt power like never before, and it slowly retracted back into my center, doing it very slowly, as if showing how to access it. A little bit of it stayed out, and I knew that if I were to look in a mirror, my eyes would be blue, but with slitted pupils. I laughed in exhilaration, and let forth a pulse of chakra. Sasuke, Shikamaru, and Neji were right behind me. I could feel their chakra, and I knew what would happen. I would fight Sasuke, Hinata would fight Neji, and that bodyguard would fight Shikamaru. I glanced over at Hinata and ran off to the final valley, to that little bit of space I would need to take out Sasuke. I kept a healthy distance ahead of Sasuke as I ran, and eventually the valley came into view. The statues of the first Hokage and Madara Uchiha dominated the landscape, and I jumped across to the head of Madara. Then I slowed down to a walk. I was waiting for him to say something, and I didn't wait long. "You're running OFF?" I turned to face him and said, "What's up, bastard?" "So, another former member of Team 7. He just stared at my eyes, no doubt wondering what was with my eyes. So I continued, "Like I already told Sakura, leave me alone." He visibly twitched, and then his cold anger started to seep out from him. I arched my eyebrow and said, "What is with that look? It doesn't make you any prettier, pretty boy." "Why?" he asked. "Naruto, what is wrong with you? Who put you up to this facade? Is this some sort of sick joke? A prank? It isn't funny, Naruto. Just stop all of this and let's go home." "This isn't a joke," I replied. "And what is wrong with me isn't your business, so let me spell it out for you. The Uchiha genius, I have my own path, and I am done being the toy of the people who made my life hell. I am going to become stronger, and then I am going to take revenge. I am not strong enough now, but with Itachi I will be." I turned around and began to walk away, and I saw his shadow fly up behind me. He tackled me to the ground, and then landed one good punch to my face. I spat the blood that filled my mouth onto his face and said, "I am going to follow the path set out for me by my father. You will not stop me. I am going to go to the Akatsuki. You cannot change that. The Akatsuki is a criminal organization, and they just want to have the nine-tailed fox inside you. Naruto, my brother nearly wiped out the entire Uchiha clan. You won't ever come back from them, Naruto. They might even kill you today. That doesn't matter anymore. I don't care about me anymore. I will do everything I can to achieve my goal." I steadied Sasuke and delivered what I meant to be a medium force punch to his gut. He caught air and flew about 15 yards into the river before the waterfall. He even skipped twice. I stood up and looked at my fist. This was the power that Itachi was going to give me. That answered all the doubts that I had in my mind. Sasuke jumped up and charged at me once again, so dashed at him and swung around him abruptly. There was no way he could have blocked this kick. A healthy smack echoed through the valley as I nailed him in the temple. He fell down the length of the waterfall and into the lake below. As the water rippled slightly, it changed my reflection from an image of me to an image of my father. 6.5 months ago, it was me, Shizune, a paralyzed Granny Tsunade, and the pervy sage versus Orochimaru and his turncoat minion Kabuto. I had just used the Rasengan on Kabuto and was in the midst of celebrating when Orochimaru lunged at me and stabbed me with a sword. I fell backwards and into my mindscape. How can I beat this guy? He is one of the legendary Prodigal 3. The Rasengan won't do a thing against somebody like him simply because I can't hit him with it. I am way out of my league. What the hell am I supposed to do? Somebody tell me. The fox replied, "Just tweak the seal a little, and let me out. I will kill whoever you want me to. Naruto. You know you could with my power. Just let me out." I was gonna die anyway. It seemed like a good idea, and plus I was tired of trying to drown out his voice. So I did it. I let Six Tails out. I was about to let them all out when somebody stopped me. It was the fourth Hokage. He pulled me away from the fox and threw me out of reach. "The seal is set so that I would appear here if Eight Tails ever came out," he said. "I never wanted to see you again, Nine Tails, but I did want to see my son grown up, so I guess we should call it even." "Come here, you whelp. I will rip you to shreds, Yondiame," bellowed the fox. "That isn't going to make me come any closer," replied the fourth. "Just the opposite, in fact, right, Naruto?" "Naruto," I replied dumbly. "That is my name." "How?" "Huh? Because I gave you that name. You are my heir, after all." "Heir? Then, you mean?" The fox roared in rage. The fourth smiled at me and said, "Yeah, just what I said. You're my son." Joy the likes of which I had never felt bubbled up within me, and I felt tears begin to form in my eyes. I finally knew who my dad was. He continued, The fox is as noisy as ever I see. We should go somewhere else." He snapped his fingers and the scene around us faded into white. It was just me and him. I was trying to wipe the tears out of my eyes so he wouldn't see, but I know that he saw. I guess the third didn't tell you anything. If people knew that you were my son, there would have been trouble. I am sorry, Naruto. The happiness that had filled me left as quickly as it had come, and it left behind anger the likes of which I had never felt. I channeled it all into one fist and punched him right in the gut. Why the hell would you seal the fox inside your own son? Do you have any idea how much trouble it has caused me? Naruto, he asked, how old are you now? 13. It must have been hard. I have no right to talk to you like I am your father. I am sorry, Naruto. Are you kidding me? I am the son of the fourth lord of Konoha, I responded. I can deal with it. The reason that I sealed half the chakra inside you is because 1, you are my son and I know you will use it the right way, and 2, because when I was fighting the fox that night 12 years ago, I realized someone was controlling the fox. Have you heard of the Akatsuki? I nodded and said, they are the ones who are after the fox. They have been hunting me. They are an organization that was founded by the 5 Kages to keep the peace. They usually work behind the scenes, but in the recent years they have let 3 wars break out, and they have become declared criminals. I don't know how that transition happened, but I think that it has something to do with the man who attacked the village. He is going to use the Akatsuki to take over the world. His name is Madara Uchiha, and he is much bigger than Orochimaru here. He must be stopped. I know a boy named Itachi. It was planned that he would gain entry into the organization. Has that happened? I thought about the man who had murdered his clan and then messed up Sasuke, and I nodded. The fourth must have seen something in my eyes and said, whatever you think you know about him is probably not true. I know for a fact that he would die for Konoha. I have maintained contact with him through his special guardian. But that is another story. I have a mission for you, my son. Are you ready to hear it? I nodded in excitement and he smiled and continued, you will train under Itachi, and then you will infiltrate the organization Akatsuki and either fix it or destroy it. Do you understand? I thought about it and nodded. This was a request from my father. How could I refuse? He smiled and then said, then in conclusion, today I will give you a gift, and Itachi will put us in contact again when you are finished with your training, and I will teach you my signature jutsu. My chakra is fading, so here is the first gift. He touched the top of my head and it felt like my insides suddenly energized. He said, I will give you my will of fire today, my son. I will also tighten your seal for good measure, and then, I have to go. He quickly and efficiently tightened the seal and then faded into nothing. I opened my eyes. A devastated landscape met my eyes. Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade all blinked in surprise to see me and not the fox, so I took that opportunity to get the hell out of the way. Orochimaru attempted to attack me, but Jiraiya and Tsunade stopped him. I got over to Shizune and asked, what do we do? She looked at me in confusion, and then responded, we should stay out of the way, Naruto. But how did you stop the fox? That isn't important. What is important is that I have learned that I am the son of the fourth Hokage. I will do whatever I have to do to protect the village. So what I am asking you is what we should do to best survive this encounter. 3 large poofs of smoke came from the Prodigal 3, and their main summons emerged. I watched what I thought was the greatest struggle of all time on that day. I was sadly wrong. After it was all said and done, I limped over to Jiraiya and said, I met my dad in my mindscape. He told me to train under Itachi. Where can I find him, Pervy Sage? I need to know. First both he and Tsunade wanted to hear my version of events, then they thought for a while, and they told me what was going to happen to me over the next couple of months, and that decided that, and my future became set. That all brought me back to where I was. Back in the present. Sasuke rose out of the water below me and stood up. So, after all of the stuff we have gone through together, I am worthless to you? He asked. No, I responded. You are my best friend, Sasuke. That is why I have to leave. I don't expect you to understand. Is it worth it, Naruto? Is it worth it to leave everything behind? Was it? The question startled me. Were all of the lies worth it? I didn't want to think about it, so I pushed it from my mind and formed a Rasengan. Sasuke formed a Chidori, and we charged at each other and our jutsu collided. We both flew backwards. I managed to stay above the water, but Sasuke didn't. When he got up, I had a kunai charged with wind element chakra. I made a stab for his heart, but he moved to the side just in time. Blood spattered me and the water around us. My kunai had severed several tendons in his shoulder, and I knew the bone was sliced in places. Sasuke was looking me in the eye, however. I noticed that his Sharingan had 3 Tomo now. He released his cursed seal, and his wounds healed. He shoved me back, and I caught air. While I was pondering the possibility in such a dramatic increase in strength, he unleashed some major combos of taijutsu on me. Rock broke behind me when I slammed into it. I winced and then quickly went through all the punches thrown in the match so far, and I realized that his attack patterns were quite elementary once you got down to it. I looked up at him and realized a moment too late that he had unleashed the full potential of his cursed seal. He had 2 humongous hand-like wings spread out behind him, and was charging right at me. I dodged his punch, but not his wing, and got pummeled once again. Once I had regained my balance, I pulled out the red chakra. He dashed at me, but I repelled him with a roar and a pulse of chakra. I felt the chakra increase in density and then surround me. I somehow knew that I had formed one tail behind me. I was protected. We both dashed at each other and landed a punch, and thus repelled each other quite efficiently. We both destroyed the feet of the 2 statues in the valley. I stood up and bellowed, causing the dust to settle. Sasuke was already up and forming a Chidori. I rapidly formed a Rasengan. Sasuke shouted, "Cursed power? Chidori lament." I bellowed, "Sealed power? Vermilion Rasengan." The 2 superpowered jutsu canceled each other, but I landed a good punch to his gut. He scratched my headband. We fell to the ground. His cursed power had retracted, and so I retracted my red chakra. Sasuke had at some point lost consciousness, and I stood over him. I fell to my knees in pain. His first question still haunted me. Was all this worth it? I knew when I was confronted by this problem, I would be causing a rift to form between us, but if I didn't do it and do it right, I knew people would die. It had to be done. Because if not me, then who? So I sucked it up. I did what Irika did, what you would have done. I committed, I said, to do what needed to be done to win this fight fast. I knew that we would probably never speak again, never be friends again or partners again. I told myself that I was okay with that because I knew I was right. I knew I was saving lives. And even though I said I was willing to go all the way with this, I wasn't. And I know this because the worst has happened. The one thing I can't live with has happened. For all of our back and forth. For all things we have said and done to each other. For all the hard questions I have had to ask. For all the terrible lies I have had to tell. There is one thing that I will never be able to tell anyone now. Not my friends, not my coworkers, not my boss. The one thing that I should have told you. But now I can't. Sasuke, it wasn't worth it. I stood up and Hinata was standing next to me. She had heard everything, and I was okay with that. I started to cry, and she held me up. "Naruto," she whispered. "I will be right here next to you the entire way. Don't worry about it. We can do this. All we have to do is keep walking forward." I nodded numbly. Hinata began to lead us away from that place. I couldn't walk very well at that point, so she just helped me along. That was when we noticed Kakashi. He looked at us, or me, and then blurred right in front of us. He looked mad. I guess he had every right to be. I had betrayed him. Then Itachi blurred between us and said, "One of my associates is waiting for you up top, you two. He will show you the rest of the way. I will take care of this fool." Hinata draped one of my arms over her shoulder and jumped up so that we were at the top area of the waterfall again. A man who looked like he had 2 different sides to him physically waited for us. He had the Akatsuki robes on, and he seemed to be growing out of a Venus flytrap. He turned on his heel and started walking, and we limped after him. I promised myself there that I would accomplish my mission, no matter the cost. I had now sacrificed too much to turn back. Hinata's perspective. It had been 3.5 years since that battle at the final valley, and since then, Naruto and I had really come into our own. We were both in the waterfall room of the Akatsuki base in the land of demons. We had just saved the land from the reign of terror of the demon Morio, all in the hard day's work of an Akatsuki apprentice. That is right, we still weren't full-fledged Akatsuki. Everybody in the organization knew we were close to getting an upgrade, which set them on edge. What most of them didn't know is that we had been trading promises for ninjutsu, so only 2 of the members were being targeted. Orochimaru, who had gone insane and left the organization many years ago, and Deidara, whom Naruto had a deep and personal hatred for. Naruto detested his art, which gave him migraines. As I pondered all of this, I let my body float around in the cool water below our waterfall. The water was cool enough to be soothing, but not cool enough to catch a cold. Naruto was sitting directly under the waterfall, concentrating on holding his sage mode for longer durations. He had picked up that jutsu from the toads, and had kept it secret to everybody but myself and our master, Itachi. Itachi had this very odd ability to come up at just the right moments. He rapped on the door to let us know that he was coming in. We were both decent, so we made no move to do anything, and he walked in. "We have our next set of stuff to do. Naruto, you and Kisame will be traveling to your mistress temple for your meeting with your father, and Hinata, you and I have a little investigative mission to take care of. We leave in an hour, be ready to leave in half an hour," our master dictated. Naruto let his sage chakra dissipate, and then jumped out from beneath the waterfall. His blonde hair was the same length as always, his birthmarks were also unchanged, but he wore the traditional Akatsuki underrobe gear. He quickly dried off and walked to a pile of various personal effects in a corner. They were his armor, or rather Itachi's old ANBU gear. He snapped the arm plates and shin guards on, buckled the vest and shoulder pads, and inserted the sword into its holster. The final touch was a fox mask, thus completing his hunter-nin disguise. He waved goodbye and then left to go seek out Kisame. Itachi motioned for me to follow him, so I did. He showed me into the map room, and I sat down on a stool. A three-dimensional map of the elemental nations was glued down on a large table. Scattered on the map were different pins, which represented points of interest. The 8 red ones represented tailed beast hosts, or Jinchuriki. 2 in the land of lightning, 2 in the land of earth, 1 in the land of water, 1 in the land of waterfalls, 1 in the land of wind, and the final one was circling the countries in a wandering pattern. He had been last seen in the land of eddies. Itachi picked up a new red one and stuck it in the fire country. We both knew that Naruto had control of his beast, and that he was currently in the nearby area, so I gazed at my master patiently, waiting for him to spill the beans. He was frowning and looking at the new mark. "The monks of the fire temple," he said, "somehow got their hands on a bit of the fox's chakra, and then made it grow. As of right now, it is growing. In about a year, it will be a fully fledged 9-tails fox spirit, which we want to avoid. I have to try help with the attack on the sand village, so you will have to do this on your own. Can you handle it?" I nodded, so he handed me a scroll with the details on this host, and the likely outcome of a fight between us if he were to undo the very fragile seal on him. The trick would be to not even let it come to a fight, and to take him alive. I was out of the hideout in half an hour, and headed towards the land of fire. The trip itself was uneventful, and I wasn't scared of being near home or meeting somebody from home, but I didn't want to cause a ruckus that would bring even more attention to the Akatsuki, so I had to be as discreet as possible. After 2 days of traveling, I finally reached the temple. I pretended to be a pilgrim looking for a couple days of rest before continuing a long journey. As I stayed in the temple, I quickly identified the Jinchuriki. His name was Sora, and the seal was on his arm, just as stated. I also quickly found out that his father was considered a hero around the temple, and he always kept the grave of his father without dirt or wear of any kind. That would be all the opening I needed. I found the grave easily, and desecrated it. I left a note, telling him where he would find me. He sought me out, and in a rage, so when he made a move to attack me with a ninjutsu, I put him under a genjutsu, and thus out of commission. I picked up his body and left the site for the nearest base, where he was put in a sealed container, to be used at the appropriate time. After that, I was left with nothing to do, but to wait for further orders from Itachi, so I decided to go out and buy myself a treat, some red bean paste. As I savored my favorite food, I noticed that 7 paper cranes flew toward the nearest hideout, which meant that it was a meeting time. I paid the fee for the paste and left the store. As soon as I was far enough away to not be disturbed, I was sucked into the astral projection jutsu. A shadow clone Naruto was busy drawing the Shikaku out from Gaara. It would be a painless procedure, and Gaara would live, if only because he was Kazekage and a friend of Naruto. The leader was deep in conversation with Itachi. "But we need someone to take care of those fools chasing Deidara, Sasori and Naruto down. I think that you and Kisame would be good for this job." "I disagree. Kisame is busy defending the real Naruto during his training. He should not be disturbed. Send me and Hinata. It will be a good test to see how far she has come. She could handle ninja of those caliber with no problems." The leader sighed and then gave in. "Fine. I assume that she already knows how to do this jutsu?" Itachi nodded and then winked at me. I rushed through the seals and invaded the mind of one of Sasori's spies, sending him some of my chakra, and his body changed into my own. I opened my new eyes and looked around. I was underground and hiding my chakra. For chakra signatures were walking past me, and they all seemed familiar. I activated my Byakugan. It was Niji, Guy, Lee, and Tenten. They were running to the location of the hideout, so I planned out my attack and acted. I sent a pulse of chakra directly at the 4 of them. They got out of the way as planned, and the pulse destroyed a small hill behind them. As I just poofed up, I popped out of the ground. The dust quickly settled, and I looked down at them. "Just who the hell are you?" Niji shouted at me. I was startled to say the least. Then I remembered that I had my straw hat on. So I discarded it and flipped my hair out from underneath my robes. They recognized me instantly. Niji gazed at me, as if dumbstruck, and I laughed at him. Guy looked around and then asked, "Do you guys know her?" "Water style. Explosive water shock wave," I shouted, and I shot out water from my mouth until I had created a miniature lake. Then I gathered some wind chakra and began to create waves. Veritable tidal waves plagued Team Guy. I went under the water and let the waves stop just as fast as they had begun, and just as Guy had recovered from the chaos, I had trapped Lee, Niji, and Tenten in water prisons. He ran at me with some sort of taijutsu attack planned, but I made eye contact, and that was all I would need. This was the same move that Itachi had used on Kakashi after our fights at the Final Valley. Guy hit me, and I turned into several crows, and the water prisons floated into the air. As Tenten, Lee, and Niji all thrashed to survive, Guy jumped at them, only for them to dodge out of the way. He unsealed some of his gates, and I let him get to the prisons, only for them to also split into crows. This only angered Guy more, but then he calmed down-ish and stopped the flow of his chakra, and thus destroyed the illusion. He proceeded to use his blinding speed to save his students from destruction by the slightest margin. I formed a water clone and looked at them each in turn. I knew that with only 30% of my usual chakra at my disposal, I wouldn't be able to win. I would be able to cripple but not kill. Itachi had told me that when fighting against ninja like Guy and Lee to not use taijutsu, and genjutsu would only go so far and ninjutsu was too slow. The only way to win was to outlast. So I started a conversation. Ano, it has been a long time, hasn't it, Niji and I-san? I would have thought that they would have killed you as soon as they took the fox out of Naruto. Why are you still alive, Hinata? I felt a tick mark form on my forehead, and apparently it showed, because Lee and Tenten were taken aback. I dropped the stuttering act. Naruto is busy taking the one tail out of Gaara right now, and I can't let you interrupt that. Naruto and I are still alive and kicking, and we are way stronger than any of you Konoha ninja. Just make it easier on everybody and go home. We will deliver the corpse when we are done. Don't worry. Even Niji was shocked. I smiled to myself and launched myself over to him, and using the blinding speed Itachi had taught me, sealed all of his chakra points in fewer than 2 seconds. He flew backwards and into the water, where I knew he would drown. Tenten threw a small artillery of weapons at me, and I effortlessly repelled all of them with a simple chakra rotation. Itachi had helped me refine that jutsu to the point where I could even direct the objects being repelled. I sent all the bombs right back at her and sent the sharpened pointies right over to Niji's body. The water turned red, and Guy went down under the water to try to save him. I used a Garkisame fusion jutsu and pressurized the water around Guy, and pinned him to the bottom of the mini-lake, and then began to slowly crush him. Tenten was still spraying weapons at me, so I sped around her and forced her into a genjutsu. She quickly lost control of her body and also fell to the bottom of the lake. That left only Rock Lee. He was staring at me in an odd mixture of fear and excitement. He was terrified of the thought of facing me, but also energized by the idea of beating me and saving everybody. I disillusioned him. "You are not going to beat me like that. You love to win, right?" He nodded absently, so I continued. "The difference between me and you is that you love to win and I hate to lose. That is what makes the difference between a winner and a loser. You want to win, but I will not accept defeat." Itachi had spent most of our 3 years in training abroad, and during one of our travels, we had bumped into a woman who used a very unusual sword. She called it Valentine, and when one pressed a button on its hilt, the blade seemed to fall apart into a whip with shards of the blade equal distant apart from each other across a maybe 4-foot-long indestructible metal wire. Then, upon releasing the switch, the wire retracted into the hilt, and it became a regular sword again. This woman was drunk and started a fight with me, and after a long and grueling match, I had killed her and taken her unusual sword for my own, and I had practiced with it until I perfectly understood how to use it. It was currently in its sheath behind my back under my robes. I withdrew it and dashed behind my adversary. Lee twirled around and brought out his nunchucks. I extended the blade to whip mode and snatched the weapons away with 2 flicks of my wrist. Then Lee brought out a staff and we entered battle once again. Lee was good, but in this I knew that eventually I would win because my weapon was so unpredictable that even Lee could not keep up with the rapid transformations it was undergoing. I finally beat the staff out of his hand and was going for the killing blow, when something pierced me from behind. It was a sword made out of lightning, Sasuke's new jutsu I had heard so much about, no doubt. This host's body was going to die, no doubt about that, but not for another 5 minutes, so I decided to play along. He withdrew the blade and took me to the beach. He laid me down and demanded, "Is Naruto still alive? Where the hell is he?" I laughed at him. I let my head roll to the right. I saw that Sakura and some old lady were treating the wounds of Team Guy. "So," I asked, "how is Itachi? I haven't seen him in a few days." He glared down at me and said, "It wasn't really him, and I can safely assume that this isn't the real you. But it thought it was worth a shot anyway." I stuck out my tongue and let the jutsu dissipate. The ritual with Gaara was nearly finished, and he was going to live, beyond a doubt. Naruto smiled at me and then focused back to his work, or rather, his shadow clone smiled at me and then he went back to work. The last bits of the shikaku drained out of Gaara and his eyes closed and then reopened. Naruto kept him from sitting up too quickly and then lifted him up and brought him to the back chamber. He gave him water and a plate of bread with some of our best ration cheese. He then locked the ornate door and handed Deidara the key. Deidara smiled and said, "That's just like you, my man Naruto. Got a plan for everything." Naruto walked over to me and opened the back door, and we left Deidara and Sasori to deal with the Konoha ninja. As we walked away, we hid our chakra and then I put on my full cloak. "So, I have a plan to get out rings. Want to know how I think we can do it?" I laughed and then nodded, so he continued, "You take Orochimaru and I can kill Deidara." I knew that Orochimaru would be no easy kill, but neither would Deidara, so as I considered the different options we kept walking. I would have to track him down and then kill him, which many had failed to do. Naruto could kill Deidara after the Konoha ninja had been sent into retreat, or he could just openly assault Deidara when he was healed afterwards. Soon we were standing in front of the Kyuubi's shrine. Naruto had built it over the years, and it was sturdy, and usually filled with the offerings of those who were superstitious after word of its creation had gotten around. That meant fresh food. Some delicious-looking fish caught my eye, so I picked them up and began to munch on them. Naruto had hired a nearby family to watch over the shrine, and they were usually scandalized when I did something like this, but I had met the Kyuubi, and I knew that she hated fish. God help you if you touched any chicken, but fish, Shaw. She could care less. Naruto walked out of the main building and saw me, and dashed straight for me. He nearly brought me to the ground in his excitement, but before I could protest, he brought me close and kissed me deeply. Fireworks shot off in my head, and I turned cherry red. Once he had broken the kiss, I tried my best to glare at him, but all that did was make him laugh at me. After 2 more such kisses, I mentioned that we should probably be watching the battle to make sure that Sasori and Deidara went down. He nodded, and we were within the hour back at the battle site. It was Sasori vs Sakura and that old lady I had seen earlier. They had nearly destroyed the entire hideout. All that remained was the back room where Gaara sat recovering. The battle was for all accounts over. Sasori was telling Sakura and this old lady about his final thoughts on whatever, probably life, and they listened intently. We would have claimed his ring if it were not for the fact that another had dibs on it, if you would. I activated my Byakugan and searched the nearby area for Deidara. He was fighting Sasuke and Kakashi. The battle was about to end, and not in the favorable way for Akatsuki. I told Naruto as much, so he blurred over to the battle. He concealed his identity completely, grabbed Deidara and ran. He was gone before Sasuke and Kakashi had a chance to react. They were miles away from me, but I still watched them. I read both their lips to watch the conversation. The general gist was that Naruto wanted Deidara's ring, which Deidara refused, so Naruto killed him. Even Deidara could not have possibly handled 6 tails. Naruto pocketed the ring and blurred back next to me. I already know where Orochimaru is going to be in about a month. Let's get him then. Until then, we can hide away from the world, and maybe pretend like we don't have to worry about it. That sounds nice, Naruto. I grabbed his hand and we took our sweet time getting back to base. Naruto went to meditate and I left to go and take a well-deserved nap. After what could not have been even 5 minutes of sleep, Naruto walked into my room with a tray loaded with tea and different traditional snacks. I was intrigued, to say the least. He started. "I need you to do you know what again?" I nodded. It was about that time of month. Due to Naruto's extreme amounts of chakra, he could get a little built up around once a month. It caused his not pain, but he would get weighed down by it. "Assume the position," I commanded. He sat down on the middle of my floor and closed his eyes. I faced him and rapidly formed the seals required. I whispered, "Ninja art, chakra extraction." I formed a needle on my right index finger and reached into Naruto's chakra pool. I slowly extracted the excess red chakra and transferred it to my left hand. It formed an orb of about 7 inches in diameter. Naruto knew that he was back to normal amounts, so he stood up and grabbed a vial from my desk. As he busied himself with that, I compressed the chakra so that 1 inch in diameter. Red liquid chakra poured into the vial with careful precision that only came with hard practice. Including this vial, we had 28 total. This little thing could be ingested in the heat of battle for sudden bursts of power that were at least 10 times as effective as soldier pills. Itachi had first tested it, and then Kisame, and we discovered that the vials increased chakra relative to the original user's chakra. Soon we would distribute them to the other members, but for now we kept them secret. The thought of red chakra brought my thoughts back to that kid Sora. I told Naruto about him, and Naruto was greatly displeased at the thought of another Kyuubi. We decided to take care of him quickly. I opened the container I had kept him in, and Naruto picked him up and set him down on a work table. He studied the seal on the boy's arm for about 2 minutes and then decided he would need to extract this mini version. He muttered something to the effect of, "She is gonna be so pee." Naruto slid through some quick hand signs and his eyes turned purple, and his pupils became slits. The Kyuubi's voice used Naruto's mouth. "What do you need from me now, kit?" Naruto's eyes went back to normal and he said, "Look deep into the chakra reserves of this guy." His eyes went to purple and he hissed, "Who did this and when?" "The monks at the fire temple, my lady." "You know what I require of you, kit, but I want to know what you have in mind." "What we did to the Akitasha clan?" "More oomph." "I have never done anything with more oomph than that, my lady." "Don't you remember what I told you I did to the warlord Shingen Takeda?" "You want me to do that?" "Yes." Naruto visibly shivered and nodded. I couldn't help but to ask, "What did she do to Shingen Takeda?" "You don't want to know," he responded. "He made me promise to stay in the base while he was gone. Something about how I wouldn't be prepared for the madness to come." I nodded meekly. If a prank scared Naruto, it probably wasn't wise to watch it unfold. When Naruto had left, I made my way to the waterfall room, stripped and meditated under the waterfall. This specific fall had been made by Naruto in his training, for the express purpose of chakra restoration and relaxation. Naruto poured some of his own chakra into this every day so that if one meditated under it, one would fill up on pure blue chakra. As I filled myself up with soothing chakra, I switched from the cool waterfall to the nearby hot spring. As I put my body through the soothing but sharp changes, I felt my muscles relax, and when I had had enough, I put on a black robe and walked over to the masseuse's table. On it were 2 bracelets that were made of brass and jade. I threw them into the nearby water and observed the transformation. The bracelets sunk to the bottom and then stirred. They floated to the top of the water, and a body of water rose from the surface of the lake and took the form of a lithe woman. Her skin was blue and translucent. She wore a simple shift and leggings, and her eyes glowed green like the jade of her bracelets. Her name was Churn, and she was an old elemental spirit of fury. She was a subordinate of the Morrigan and thus obeyed me explicitly. In ancient times, when the Morrigan and the Kyuubi walked the earth freely, a man stole the magic of the spirits and gave some of the elements life. Before he could finish his spell, the Morrigan and the other spirits stopped him, but the elements still had life. So what they did was they redid the original spell with a twist. The elements would obey the spirits rather than the man. They were from then on called Furies. The Morrigan taught me how to bind a Fury to a physical body, and Churn was the result of my first attempt. Water Furies were almost no good at fighting, but they were the best healers around, and that was Churn's main function. She could stretch you out by just touching you. She could heal all but the most grievous of injuries in no time at all, and as it turned out, she could give one hell of a massage. I had also bound Earth, Wind, and Fire Furies, but as it turned out, it was much harder to form a substantial Lightning Fury. Earth Furies were super strong and very fast, but turned to dust the minute they lost contact with the Earth. They usually took the forms of mammals. Fire Furies were excellent for attacking, but were rather like a bomb than a stream of fire. They just destroyed everything around them if not carefully monitored. They took the forms of birds, or powerful ones became dragons. Wind Furies were no good at fighting. They could fly and let you fly with them, but were usually destroyed by salt. They took the forms of animals that moved as fast as they did, whether that be birds, horses, and I had even seen one in the shape of a griffin. In order to bind a lightning fury, you had to get struck by lightning, which I did not want to do, so I didn't have one. But the Morrigan knew another way, and I knew it, so I was working on getting her to spill it, mainly through promises of feeding her children, the crows, but also I have let her channel herself through me, which gives her control of my body in the middle of battle, which she greatly enjoys, being the spirit of war. The only problem with the latter is that she leaves no prisoners, which can be troublesome in missions. Churn worked her magic on me, showing no mercy, and put me into a stupor. I almost didn't notice the crow that flew into the room. It had Byakugan eyes, which meant that my mistress wanted to speak. I mentally descended into my mindscape. She was waiting for me. A war has broken out in the East that I have taken interest in. You will go there and monitor it. For me, it is a war between families, specifically mine, she said. I don't want to tell you how it started, but here is the general idea. My two sisters have decided that because I am not constantly watching them anymore, that they can resume their bickering, and they have decided for a chess match of sorts, but using real people as pieces. You will confront my sisters and make them see reason. We do not use humans to settle petty squabbles. I nodded meekly and then rose to consciousness. Churn was done with me and had sunk back into the water, leaving her bracelets on the table next to me. I donned some new clothes and left the hideout without another word. When the Morrigan had said east, it turned out she had meant far to the east. 3 days ninja run to the east. I knew that I had gotten to where I needed to be because there was a monumental battle occurring. I activated my Byakugan and noticed there were only 2 crows in the entire battlefield. This was strange because crows usually flock to battlefields as a rule, because they feast on the remains. So those 2 must have been the sisters. They were fighting high above the main conflict. I reached into a pouch at my side and pulled out a large bird talon. I felt for a breeze and I threw said talon into that breeze and my fury manifested. I called him Jetstream and he took the form of a gigantic hawk. I jumped on his back and flew into the air. The 2 crows stopped fighting for a moment to stare at my fury, and I noticed that when they did that, the 2 armies below them crumpled into balls of exhaustion. They looked at me and made their beaks smile, and then simultaneously charged at me. Jetstream was only barely faster. His great wings bashed them silly and then onto the ground. We flew down to catch up to them, and then once on the ground I dismissed Jetstream. I put his talon away in my pouch and brought out 2 gigantic emeralds. I dropped them onto the ground, and a wolf made of earth the size of a small horse formed up, with the emeralds as eyes. Julius, I said, pin these 2 mongrels down for me, please? Julius bounded towards them and pinned them both down with a paw and then looked back at me. I nodded, so he looked back down at them and growled deep in his throat. With a poof, the 2 crows took their real forms, which were similar to the Morrigan in every way but their eyes, which instead of black were yellow and green respectively. I walked up to Julius and scratched him behind the ears, which made him whine in delight, and then called my mistress. Her presence filled me and I let her take over. She started to speak in a tongue that I did not understand, which told me that I was not allowed into this discussion. They argued for a very long time, so long that Julius sat down because his feet hurt. I could tell because he was my fury, and there was a profound bond in that. When it was all said and done, my mistress told Julius to get off them, which he did, and the sisters slunk off like 2 whipped children. The Morrigan gave me control of my body again without another word, and then left my body without any new orders, so I went home. On the 2nd day of travel, I found myself in the middle of quite the thunderstorm. It got so bad that I had to stop and hide under the protection of some trees. As I prepared for the worst, a lone crow flitted over to me. It had Sharingan eyes, and we made eye contact, and then the knowledge of how to bind a lightning fury was impressed upon me. Then it left without another word. I didn't have to get struck by lightning, I just had to have what I planned to bind it to hit the bolt. So I sent Julius deep into the earth to find some rare gemstones or metals, because those worked best, and was rewarded with some silver and 4 sapphires. I called forth Jetstream to create a wind shield against the rain, and then I reached into my fury pouch and brought out a gold collar inlaid with garnet. Using that, I called forth my most powerful fury, Slag. He was what most people would call a dragon, but specifically, his form was similar to our own teenage body for a dragon. He said it was a drake. His body was formed from molten lava, and his wings were made of white fire. He could fly, but to fly on him would be suicide. I need a favor, Slag, I requested. Could you please make a collar out of this stuff? I am going to bind another fury. I tossed the silver and the gems into the air, and he snatched them from the air with his powerful jaws. He chewed on it for a little and then spat it out onto the ground. The only way that Slag could develop into a fully fledged dragon was if I kept feeding him garnet, so as reward, I tossed him a lump that I had found a while back while near a volcano, and he gulped it down greedily. He showed me his intimidating teeth in a grin and then dissipated, his collar falling down to the ground near the one he had just made. I patted Julius on the head, and then dismissed him, jumped onto Jetstream and flew up into the air. Jetstream could do this thing where he quickened my reactions to the point of absurdity, so when lightning struck, the collar hit it just in time. A great flash of light filled the area and the collar was filled with said element, and then took the shape of a velociraptor. He looked at me and I flew down to meet him. "Your name is Silverbolt, okay?" He nodded, and then dissipated, and I was greatly pleased with myself and my new fury. Naruto was going to be absolutely green with envy. Even after Itachi's craziness, he still loved to learn new jutsu, and the Kyuubi didn't want Naruto to use furies for whatever reason, and he was intensely jealous. After I had tamed Silverbolt, I discovered that he had been the one causing the storm, so it quickly faded into nothing, and my journey continued with all speed. When I finally got home, Naruto was getting pounded by churn and grunting and groaning as different points of his back were tweaked. "Wussy," I called him. He waved my comment off and grunted in pleasure. "Check out my new friend," I taunted. Silverbolt formed and made a gesture similar to cracking his neck and then shook some sensation off. Naruto looked up, analyzed what he saw, his jaw dropped. Then he narrowed his eyes and breathed in as if to say something petulant and rude. But Churn saw this and quickly delivered a strong and yet decisive blow to his mid-back, which sent him back into his noisy stupor. A new, but familiar voice entered the conversation. "It is mean to tease like that, Hinata. You know how Naruto gets around new furies." Itachi had been sitting under the waterfall, regaining chakra from some mission no doubt, observing in silence, which was his thing. I bowed in respect and then said, "I finally got the whole set." His eyes were closed, but his smirk betrayed his amusement. I looked around the room for Kisame, and saw that he was on the bottom of our small lake grinning his usual madman grin. I waved and he waved back. I had a good relationship with Sharkman. Simply this one time during my training I learned under Kisame about the using of shinobi swords. I wouldn't take the shark skin from Kisame because it didn't like my chakra as much as it liked Kisame's. But as soon as I found another one of the swordsmen, I knew that I would have their sword. Naruto's voice carried across the cave. "Do you know what day it is, Hinata?" "No," I responded, "but I have a feeling that you do." "It is the 28th of December. Happy birthday." I gasped. It was my birthday. I had forgotten. Wow. I was 16. Naruto was quite suddenly right behind me, so I turned around and was handed a flyer of some festival in the Land of Waves. "I got a great dinner reservation at this tiny little place I know over there. It should be a lot of fun. We have to get ready to go soon, so I am gonna go get my gear all set up to go. You should too, hint hint." He was gone in a flash of yellow that made me smile. His father's ninjutsu and sacred mission were just excuses for him to learn new tricks. Kisame gave me a very disconcerting hug, and then presented me with a ninjutsu scroll that he had no doubt stolen from the hidden mist village on his historic breakout. Itachi came over to me and poked me in the head with his index and middle fingers and said, "I am sorry. It will have to be another time. Hinata, right now you have to catch up with Naruto. He has spent a lot of time on this one." I self-consciously laughed and then sprinted away. Naruto was waiting for me at the door, in an all-black duplicate of his normal orange jacket pants set. He took my hand when I nodded to him and we teleported away. The restaurant initially looked very shabby, but I found out that the reason that Naruto had invited me was because they had the best red bean soup he had ever had, and there was a coffee shop across the streets with good cinnamon rolls. He was at the top of his game that day. The soup was amazing and the rolls blew my mind. Naruto invited me to a walk across the Great Naruto Bridge and told me the story of this bridge. It was classic Naruto. When we finally reached the grave of Zabuza, we found that the sword was no longer there. I was slightly disappointed, but I quickly got over it because Naruto said that he had a treat for me, and so we crept over some trees and saw that some Miss Ninja were nearby, and one of them held Zabuza's sword, and another one had a different shinobi sword. It was the Hiramakarei, which meant that Chojiro was the second ninja. I knew this because Kisame had given me a roster. Naruto whispered to me, "If you want the Hiramakarei, then take it, but I am taking the decapitating carving knife with me back to the grave site." I nodded, and then summoned my furies. I stationed Julius underneath the camp, Silverbolt about 5 yards out of sight, and Slag was with me. I formed a blade from chakra pointing out from my fingers, dashed up and stabbed the bearer of Zabuza's blade in the back. He died quietly, but in plain sight, which was normally taboo in a ninja fight, But then Silverbolt, pardon the pun, dashed in like lightning and jumped him, digging his claws into Chojiro's back and electrocuting him. Chojiro managed to yank him off and draw his blade, and called, "Hiramakerii unleashing." The bandages around the blade fell to the ground, and a chakra hammer formed around the blade, which he smashed down on Silverbolt. The result of that blow was one KO'd Lightning Fury. Chojiro started to rapidly swing the hammer around his head, so I backed off. I called Julius, who jumped out of the ground and onto my body, forming an earthen armor. I called up Julius' strength through that earth and stopped the blade with a fist. Chojiro bounced backwards onto his ass and blinked up at me. I brought down my fist only to miss his crotch by inches. He quickly jumped up and swung the blade again, but this time aimed at my head. I spun around, my head ringing, and hit the dirt. The main reason that Naruto didn't interfere was because, well, if he did, the blade would recognize him as the successor of Chojiro, which I didn't want. So he stayed back and watched, no doubt laughing at the whooping that he knew Chojiro had coming, because that hit had pissed me off, which meant that I got sucked into the dirt with Julius and then spewed out into the air, which signaled Slag to start with our team attack. "It is time," I shouted, "for the onslaught." I landed on the ground and began a chakra rotation. Slag blew some of his fire onto this ball, and thus turned me into a spinning ball of flaming death. Slag proceeded to play kitten and ball of yarn with me all over the battlefield, and then concluded by adding more flame to the ball and then jumping back. The reason he jumped back was because at that moment, I let the chakra shoot off of my rotation, which created a fireball approximately 20 yards in radius. All that was left in the entire clearing was Hiramakerii. Naruto dropped out of thin air next to me and whispered, "What is that thing called again?" "Hiramakerii," I responded, "otherwise known as the Blade of Flickering Splendor." Naruto nodded and said, "I did good, didn't I?" "Yes, you are a good boy."